So welcome back. We are back for episode 3, and I am Coach Desiree.
And I, why do we
Who are
do this
you?
every time? I am Coach Crystal, and we are the Life Coach Bestie. So Desiree really wants us to say this together. I'm not doing it. I'm not doing it. She
Why
Coach
do we have to
Desiree.
fuss?
Every time we have guests, so we have company. Let's not act up today.
But we want to show our togetherness in the Life Coach Bestie. So that's why we need to say it together. But it's okay. Maybe when we get to episode 50, we'll be saying it together. It's all right.
Yeah, you know.
Possibly.
Thank you, Pastor Q. Pastor Quentin M. Mumphery, a native of Chicago's South Side. Pastor Mumphery is the founder and senior pastor of the New Hope Covenant Church, a church plant on the southeast side of Chicago. In addition to his pastoral role, Pastor Mumphery has a passion for training, equipping, and educating emerging leaders, having developed workshops and training curriculum for hundreds of leaders over the last decade. Pastor Mumphery is an adjunct instructor for North Park University and has nearly 2 decades of experience working in the field of education, having held leadership positions with the Chicago Public School, Camelot Education, and North Park University. He has also previously developed college readiness programming with a 100% acceptance rate for students into 4-year colleges and universities. Pastor Mumphery, a graduate of Whitney M. Young Magnet High School and the University of Illinois at Chicago. He also received his master's degree from North Park Theological Seminary. His passion for leadership, justice, education, and civic engagement has also led him to serve in a volunteer capacity with numerous civil rights and nonprofit organizations such as Rainbow Push, the Chicago Urban League, and numerous others.
All right, so welcome back everyone to episode 3. We are delighted and excited to have our first guest all the way from Chicago, Illinois,
Woo!
Pastor Quentin Mumphery.
Hey.
He is the pastor of my church. And Desiree, is it your church?
Yeah, I
Close.
am. I'm still working on it, but I'll be there.
It's okay.
I'm there every Sunday.
That's right. He's faithful.
He is the pastor of New Hope Covenant Church. And so we are so excited to have him here with us today. Welcome, Pastor Q.
Thank y'all for having me.
And so we will share all of his social media accounts, his IG, Facebook. And so just look, Desiree will add all the fancy stuff at the end for you guys to know where to follow him. So today we are jumping into a new topic, and we'll probably stay in this topic for the month of April. So we are discussing identity. Identity. And so Desiree and I have a lot of conversations about who we are as Black women, how we see ourselves. And so we really wanted another perspective. And we really wanted to just dig into this whole idea of identity development. I know Desiree has her identity. She's a mom, she's a wife, she is a Christian, she is an educator. She has all of these things that have helped guide who she is. I am single. I am not a mom. I am not a wife.
Who are you, Crystal? Then who are you? You just say who you were not. Desiree is, and I am not. No, that's not how this is supposed to go.
But
I'm listening.
But sometimes that is how we are socialized.
That's true. That's
right?
true. But we don't identify with that.
We don't identify with that.
We don't.
So we are really just wanting to jump into this conversation. This conversation started was it 2 weeks ago? Last week? I don't know. Social media goes. The things that happen on social media happen so fast. But this conversation started with Derrick Jackson. And so we know Derrick Jackson to be this internet sensation. Well, I don't know, because most people acted like they didn't know who he was when it all started. I didn't know who he was. I didn't really know who he was. But he is a guy who gives a lot of advice to women. And sometimes, from what I've seen, it's very much condemning men in a way, and telling women what they should and should not take or accept from men, and how they should be their best selves, and just a lot of that advice. Now, from my research, he is not a certified counselor. He is not a certified life coach. He is not a certified anything. He just has a lot of opinions about being what women should be doing, or how women should be representing themselves. And so the scandal is that the women, or the mistress, the person that he was cheating on his wife with, exposed that, you know, all these encouraging videos he was making outside of my house. So,
wait, I didn't know that part.
Yes. And so just pretty much, and then he put his wife on display, and, you know, just, it was just a lot. And so the conversation really developed and I had this conversation with Pastor Q too, like, why are women, or why are people, I mean, I just say women, but why, well, I can say women because he only really spoke to women.
Talked to women, and he bashed men.
Right. But why are women, especially single women, so interested in a person telling them how to be single, or so interested in the person telling them how not to be single, or how to be a woman, or how a woman should look, or how she should dress, or how, like, why has he made so much money? Because he has like 3 books that people continue to buy. And I think his sales increased after the scandal. It's
I like Pastor Q's.
It's just very mind-boggling to me. And so Desiree and I really like to get to the root of things, because that's how we feel like people can grow and evolve. And so to us, the root is identity. It's a lack of knowing who you are. It's a lack of knowing what God says about you, what, you know, even you say about you. And so we really just want to dig into this conversation. And so Pastor Q is here to just give us the male perspective, and for us just to learn from one another, because, you know, there are a lot of things that I'm really just like, like, how did we get here as a society? Like, I'm just confused. And so my first question is just, how are identities developed, and where are they developed, and what is the significance of really understanding who you are, your identity, and how you see yourself?
So I think that when we talk about identity, there's another word that we have to make sure we have in the same space, and that is complexity. The fact of the matter is, identity and complexity go hand in hand. There are many different factors that comprise an individual's identity, right? So myself, as a 42-year-old unmarried Black man in America who's been through a divorce, right, but who does not have children, who is college educated, who is a country boy at heart, but who is a pastor and a churchman and all these things. So all of those different factors and nuances that comprise who I am, you know, the youngest child of Grace and Elbert Mumphery, right? So all of these things, the family you come from, your faith position or lack thereof, your region, your geography, your position and place in your family, your life experiences, your educational background, your profession, your dating experiences, your sexuality, and your experiences in that space. All of those things comprise or contribute to developing your identity. You know, the unique thing about human beings is that when you look at a person's fingerprint, out of the 7.5 billion people in the world, no 2 people have the same fingerprint, right? And I believe that that's kind of the marvel of God's creation, that God in his wisdom made us unique and individual. Even twins, identical twins, don't have the same fingerprint. And so you think about identity, right? 2 people can grow up in the same home, but go on to live 2 very different lives, have 2 very different worldviews, have 2 very different ways of being and doing in the world. So I think that there are many examples. I don't have to go into examples of that, but we see them all the time, right? People can grow up in the same neighborhood, have very different outcomes. People can go to the same schools, have very different outcomes. So we talk about identity. I think sometimes we think about identity as kind of this one track thing of, just who am I? But when you talk about identity, identity is like gumbo. It's a whole bunch of stuff in there that really creates what you taste. So in other words, when you experience, right? So gumbo is a taste, it is an experience. And so when you taste something, you're not just tasting gumbo, you are tasting what happened when you had shrimp, when you had sausage, when you had a roux, right? When you had all these different things that were put under heat and simmered over time.
Oh my God.
Allowed to meld and mesh together. That's what you're tasting. So when you meet a person and you experience them, you're not just experiencing them, you're tasting what the ingredients are that has gone into building them, into forming them, and the heat that has been applied over time in their life to meld all of those things together. So for me, I am a melding and a melting pot of different experiences, different worldviews, right? Which make my identity unique. And I often say, can't nobody beat me being me, because, and I think one of the things is identity. I think one of the problems that we have in the world is a lot of people don't know who they are. And because they don't know who they are, they can't embrace their own identity, because we spend so much of our time trying to be someone else, and I think social media, we'll probably get to this later in a little bit, but I think social media has really contributed to this. I think social media has exacerbated this issue of identity with people. And you all have heard me tell the church before, we judge our life, our whole movie on someone else's highlight reel, because you see the one cute picture that someone took, you didn't see the 50 ugly selfies that they took in front of you, right?
Hello.
The couple that's walking on the beach holding hands, and you talking about relationship goals, and you talking about I want to be like them. You didn't see them push each other out. Right?
Let me tell you something, Pastor Q. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to say.
You don't see all of the things that you see what you see, but you don't know everything that's behind it. So when we go, I always go back to scripture, right? The scripture says we're fearfully and wonderfully made in Psalm 139. Marvelous how that works, and that my soul knows right well. But what does it mean to be fearfully and wonderfully made? So I think when you talk about identity, and then again, some people may not have the same faith conviction I do, and that's perfectly fine. But I think that for me, identity starts with who we are in God, who God creates us to be. In Genesis, he says in the beginning, he created them male and female, and he created them unique and separate as individual. And men and women, we have a separate, unique identity that is God-given, that should be embraced, that we should, affirm the uniqueness of who God created us to be. But again, identity is very complex. It's a mixture of factors and different things that comprise it, that make it up. And because people may have similar experiences to you, but nobody has experienced it as you. Right. So if someone has been abused or mishandled or mistreated or violated in some way, you may have a shared experience as them, but two people can go through it and experience it, and their experience of that is very different, right? Two people can have a joyous experience or a pleasurable experience, and their experience of that thing can be different. So I think just touching on the gender piece with men and women, when the Bible talks about in Genesis, because I do believe in the authority of Scripture. That's who I am. That's part of my identity as a theologically conservative Black Pentecostal preacher, right? And so in Genesis, when God formed, the Bible says that he took from the dust of the ground, he formed the man, and he breathed into him the breath of life, and man became a living soul, the nephesh in Hebrew. But then when he looked at the man further down, it says, not good that he be alone, I'm going to make a helper suitable for him. So what he did was he took from the man a rib and then formed the woman. And so there was a different kind of process, watch this, that God used to create the woman than what he used to create the man. And when he even spoke to them, the first thing that he gave Adam was work. The first thing that he gave Eve was a husband. And so I'm not saying that, you're not anyone without that, but I think part of that is contributed to how we relate in the world. Men's primary identities are to our work. Women many times relate primarily to relationship, right? I don't mean just husband, but relationship in general, whether it's your girlfriends, whether it's family. But women tend to be more relational. I'm not saying I'm making some broad, some sweeping brushstrokes here, but I recognize this may not apply to everyone, but in general, women relate easier. So for instance, women, y'all can meet in general, y'all can meet each other in 10 minutes and you got a new friend.
That's us.
Right? But men can know each other for 10 years.
Yeah.
And you'll be like, what does so-and-so like? I don't know. And you ask a man like, well, what is he? I don't know. What does he do? I don't know. What do you know? He works at such he got 3 kids, we'll know basically, but you all will learn nuances of each other's lives in a matter of minutes. Brothers, we can know each other years and not know some of those details. So again,
thank you for clarifying that, because I am baffled every time. It's just like, well, I thought that
but it's all about wiring, right?
Yeah.
So it's not that men can't be relational. It's that it is not as natural for us. It's a more intentional process for men, because when God created the man, man's point of reference was to the ground. The man was formed out of the ground, and then God put him in a garden. So that's why little boys like to get dirty. They like to play in dirt, because their identity and their point of reference, even in creation, was to the ground. That's why men have an infatuation with projects and stuff that they're trying to do. A man's self-esteem is largely tied to the value he contributes in the world. A healthy, a normal. I ain't talking about jokers be sitting up on the couch, playing PSP all day. That ain't healthy. That ain't going. Something in the developmental process is wrong there. And my name is Quentin Mumphery. I prove that message. But a man was designed and built by God to work, right? Now, again, your work ain't always your job. Your work is the thing that you do that adds value in the world. And so so you may be more passionate about stuff you do outside the job that brings value to the world than you are your 9 to 5, but that's your work. And so that's part of the identity piece. That first thing you meet a man, one of the first things you're going to learn about the man is what kind of work he does, right? Even if you don't ask, he gonna say it somewhere,
that's
right?
True.
Because the identity is to the ground, to the work of our hands. And so a big part of man's identity is that piece of purpose and work, and what a man does in the world, the value that he contributes. With women, again, the value and the point of reference is not always to her work. It's oftentimes things like, so for instance, you meet a woman who has kids, first thing she's gonna do is talk about her family, right? Whereas a man, you might learn later that he got a family, but he'll talk about work and other things, because again, the point of reference is different. So that's just a piece of identity right there.
Look, y'all, this is only question 1. So this is going to be, this is fantastic. I've taken a page of notes already. So, you mentioned a lot of things. You mentioned social media, which is huge. And before we had social media, we had media, period, TV, print. And even with jobs, like, how do people find their identity? Because a lot of times it's so closely connected to, I have to be a certain way with my family, and I have to be a certain way at my job, and I have to be a certain way because of what I see with my friends or not online. How do people find their identity?
And let me add to that. I feel like women have to be a certain way. I feel like men, for the most part, can be the same at work, the same at church.
No.
Okay, so help me, preacher, because
I'm part of a group called Men of Color in Educational Leadership, and we have this conversation often. And these are all brothers who are, some are school superintendents, some are principals, high-level administrators, some run educational organizations, all in some level of high-level leadership and education. And we have this conversation often about the pressure, because this is a group of mainly Black men. We have a few Latino brothers in there, but the pressure of Black and brown men to code switch. That in your professional life, you got to have this thing on. You can't be too angry. You can't be too animated, right? Some of us are larger brothers, 6 feet and up, and and some bigger guys. So especially if you're a larger Black man, there's a way in which you try to make yourself smaller in certain spaces. So you're not as intimidating or threatening. And so I would disagree that we can just be any kind of way, because the fact of the matter is, as Black men, if you really could be any kind of way, you wouldn't be deemed a threat. And so I think there is a pressure on both Black men and Black women. It's just a different kind of pressure. See, you all have a pressure of appearance. We have a pressure of being non-threatening. And so, for instance, in a professional space, right, you all have the appearance, you all have the pressure of, okay, I can't come off as being a Black girl with the attitude, right?
Yeah.
Whereas we have the pressure of, I can't come off as being an angry Black man who about to steal off somebody, right? So both pressures, but in a different kind of way, right? Both can cause you to be marginalized. Both can be threatening in a way, or deemed as threatening, but it's a different kind of space, right? And so there are pressures on both sides. I think the difference is when we're outside of the professional space, there's a way in which, and some of this is because, you know, I mean, we do live in a male-dominated society by and large, although I think there are some shifts in that. And I think there's some nuances for that, particularly in the Black community, which, you know, we may get into later, because income disparities in the Black community are different than when you look at the white community, because there are a much higher percentage of Black women who are college educated, and fastest growing group of entrepreneurs and business owners right now in America is Black women. Black women are also purchasing homes at a higher rate than Black men. So I believe that when you talk about the socioeconomic landscape of the Black community, it is shifting. Now, it may not have all the way shifted, but it is shifting, which I believe has implications for marriage and families when you talk about stability of the Black community, which is a whole other thing. But when you talk about identity and how we fit in spaces, I wouldn't say that, you know, men can just be any kind of way, because as a Black man, you are mindful how you dress, right? You are mindful of how people perceive you, especially when you're in white dominated spaces. I think now when we're amongst other Black folk, it is a little different. And I think part of that is because of things like physical appearance and the pressures of image and things of that nature, which may be some of what you're getting at.
So, let's dig deeper into that. So do you, as a, you know, just based off of your work experience and your experience as a pastor, do you feel like in leadership positions, do you feel like, and I can only speak for Black people because I've only been Black my whole life. But do you feel like there is a space for, or do you think that we should do a better job within these arenas to be protective of, because everybody's not going to understand the idea of making yourself small. Like that's a huge, like that's like a decision I make every single day. You know, I know Desiree can really speak to that in her position, but it's a decision you have to make every day. And sometimes, just in my experience, and I'll just be honest, I feel like I did that a lot for my Black male counterpart, and it was not reciprocated.
So, you know, I hear that, and I've heard that. You're not the first Black woman I've heard express that. I do think there needs to be a better job done. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I think part of the problem is the times that it does happen where Black men reciprocate that for Black women is not often observed or even publicized. But I do think there is a way in which Black women sometimes feel a heavy pressure to protect Black men. But I believe part of it goes back to slavery. And I'm not trying to get too deep into this, but if you go back into slavery and the times after, during slavery, the Black man was and I would argue still is the most feared person in the country, right? Black women were not feared as much as they were objectified. So Black women during slavery were deemed as objects of sexual conquest. You know, the masters, the slave masters, slave owners took Black women as essentially bed wenches and decided, that's why you had these notice, the irony of all this, and this is a little rabbit trail. The irony of all this is that when you look out throughout American history, there's been so much fear of Black men brutalizing white women, going back to Emmett Till, going back to Rosewood, going back to all these different stories,
Mm-hmm.
even the Jim Crow era, and the post-Reconstruction era, the Ku Klux Klan largely mobilized because of this fear, going back to 1915 with D.W. Griffin's damnable, horrible, deplorable movie, Birth of a Nation, in which the whole premise of it was that these savage black men are going to go, these big savage black men are going to go brutalize these little dainty, flowery white women. And so the Ku Klux Klan mobilized to protect them from these savage black men, when in actuality, the history of America is more of that, of white men brutalizing black women than it has been black men brutalizing white women, because most of the mulatto baby, a black man could not impregnate a white woman in slavery and keep his life, right? And so the mulatto babies that were born during slavery were overwhelmingly with those which were born to black women, and who were sired by white men. And so going back to what we're talking about with protection, because black women were, although they were objectified and they endured rape, they were not viewed as the physical threat as much as black men were. And so black women often took it upon themselves to be that buffer to try to stand in harm's way, because the thought was they're quicker to hurt you than they would to hurt me. And so that's part of where I believe, and this is not I don't have any empirical evidence. I haven't done a study on this, and I didn't do a dissertation on it, but this is what I believe, is that the roots of this thing go back to slavery, where because black men were viewed as such a threat, black women, although they were objectified and raped and brutalized, were not viewed as physically threatening in the same way that black men were. So they decided that there was this prevailing notion of being the buffer to kind of soften the blow for black men, if you will.
Yeah. And I think this conversation is so important because social media wants us to not understand one another. You know, the conversation that I always see is, you know, black men don't support, like, and that's not true. You know, that's just, it's totally false.
We have to be careful of these sweeping generalizations.
Yeah.
Always, never, these kind of things. That is not true.
Yeah.
And so I think there is a divide, but I think we feed into the divide a lot of times.
Yeah.
Malcolm X even said that the most unprotected person in the world is a black woman. So, and there are brothers that do stand up to protect black women on the regular. But I think we highlight trifling examples because we have a fascination with the trifling. That's just, right? People like reality TV because the people are trash and they trifling. I think it's trash TV. I've got, you know, my sister got my mama watching them things, and I go and be like, look, why do you have my mama watching garbage?
let Grace enjoy herself.
Trash. But if these people were on there acting civilized and just had normal lives, people wouldn't watch it because it's boring. But we have a fascination with the trifling and in our country and our culture.
Yeah. This is interesting.
It's so good because you know, the whole protection thing is something that Crystal and I talk about a lot. And I'm like, I know I'm a very, very protective person, and Crystal is too. I think we're protective in different ways. And I said, maybe it's just because I don't feel protected. Maybe that's why, because I'm trying to give somebody something that I don't overwhelmingly feel. So, I mean, I'm a student today. Like, I am learning a whole lot about, you know, the origin of it and where it's come from and how we can, you know, continue to make it better. But it's just our circles and, you know, continue to have honest conversations about what we need as Black women and as friends and as wives or whatever we are. So.
And I told this, Desiree knows this story, but when we talk about identity, I'll never forget when I was 23, and I was working my first job. I was working in a school, and there was this woman who I like totally looked up to. She was a doctor. She was the first doctor I had ever met, doctor of education, and she was just super dope. Like, I just thought that she was the best. And so I was like, man, one day I want to have my doctorate. And she said, don't do it, girl. And I was like, now mind you, I was 23, so she was probably in her 40s. She was going through a divorce at the time. And her advice to me was, once you reach this level of education, a man won't want you. And as a 23-year-old who just graduated from the illustrious Hampton University, shout out to the real HU, and don't do that, Pastor Q. As a person, I was in DePaul working on my master's. I come from a very educated family. Everybody in my family has a master's degree. Like, that's just the norm. And for her to tell me that this one piece of an identity of something that I really desired to be a part of who I was would not get me something else that I desired, that really hit me in a drastic way. And so, of course, like Pastor Q said, just really living out your journey and going through your different experiences, you start to understand that a lot of people put their insecurities on you. Yeah. And if you're not solid and grounded, you will start to allow that to form who you are, or who you think you are, or who you think you can be or can never be. And so it took, and I was able to shake it off. I talked to my dad about it, and he was like, girl, no. And so, but it was just her language to me was just, girl, a man can't handle you being smart. And I'm just like, but my dad is smart. My mom is smart. Like, what? That doesn't make like it, but I really had to sit and like, but I think there are a lot of situations like that where people just really get stuck, and it takes us longer. It takes women longer, I guess, to truly believe, I can still do all these things and not be deemed as a threat.
I think you bring up an interesting issue, and I've actually heard that statement before. When women being told, or even other women saying, the higher up I go, the less options I have, and things like that. I think that I think it's dangerous to make those kind of generalizations, but I'm not tone deaf to the fact that is some people's lived experience, right? I think the issue, though, is not that men won't want you. It is the question of the kind of men that you attract into your life. So one of the problems, I believe, with women, that is sometimes because women have this nurturing side, some women, I won't say all, but some women are drawn to very broken men, and men who perhaps struggle with insecurities, which everybody struggles with insecurities on some level at some point in time. I think it's a matter of doing your own soul work to allow God to heal you in the places where you have been broken, and to develop a healthy self-esteem and all those things. But I think that as it pertains to having those options and everything, I think that it takes a secure man, right, to be with a woman, and because you can make an argument for the other side, right? So if a woman has nothing going for her, does a man want that either, right? I've heard some say that, right? And so it's like, well, what's this magical middle ground? She can't have too much. She can't have nothing. What is this magical middle ground that a man? And at the end of the day, I have seen brothers pick women who knew nothing and were dumped in a box of rocks. I have seen brothers pick women who had more degrees than a thermometer. I think it comes down to what that person is looking for, what it is they desire, what is their chemistry and personality there. As I navigate, my own journey in the relationship space, and one of the things that I often pray, according to Proverbs, Proverbs 22 says that the king's heart is in the Lord's hand, and like the rivers of water, he turns it where he chooses. And I always tell the Lord in prayer, because the king's heart is in your hand, I have to believe that mine is too. So turn my heart toward my wife and let her heart be turned toward me. Whoever she is, let our hearts be turned toward each other. But see, that's where God comes into the conversation, right? In Genesis, when I always go back, anyone that knows me, I always go back to Genesis 2 and 3. When God formed Eve, the Bible says he brought her to the man. And then Adam said, this is now bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. And so it's not to say that, man won't want a woman with this, man won't want a woman with that. At the end of the day, I've seen men pick everything on the spectrum. I think what it is, part of what it is we got to be cautious of the messages we send to children and young adults. And let me
that part.
We treat boys and girls differently from childhood. And I'll give a little example of some of that, right? So one of the messages we give to little boys is if he falls, get up as fast as you can, dust it off, shake yourself out, don't cry, right? But if a little girl falls and she cries, oh, what's wrong, baby? And we hug them and we coddle them, right? But then when that same little boy who we've told from childhood, don't cry when you fall, you scuff your knee, shake it off, you ain't hurt, even though he bleeding, right? You ain't hurt, you all right, shake it off, you tough, you're a boy, you're a man, right? Shake it off, don't cry. Then when he gets 21 and he's dating a girl in college, she's like, well, how come you never express yourself? Because I've been told my whole life
never to express myself,
nothing, right?
Yeah.
And so we have these conflicting messages, right, that we give to them. When it comes to education, it is a major expectation for girls to be smart, right?
Yeah.
Boys will get called a nerd quicker than a girl will for being smart, right? A little black boy that's smart, oh, he think he white. Oh, he's nerd, he's this and that, right? So we have this expectation of what smart needs to be and look like. So black boys who are smart or have potential, they will put less pressure on them to achieve academically. So we'll push the girls to go to school. We'll push the girls to that. But that has its roots historically with black folk too, because boys, because they're stronger naturally and just, biologically, we need it as farm hands, right? And so let the girl go to school, but the boy, you coming out here in the field of work, right? And so, but fast forward to now, so now we say, all right, as a young black woman, you're 18, you're on your way to college, right? What do we tell girls when they go to college? Don't go there screwing, don't get pregnant, don't come back with no babies.
Yep.
Don't worry about no boy, they'll be there later on. Focus on your education. Now, I know that my view, and some people may disagree with me on this, my view is a little different and unorthodox. I just told someone this last weekend. I'm going to encourage my kids to get married young. And because I believe, and this is, well, y'all know me well enough to know I'm not scripted like that.
Yeah, go. Do you, Pastor?
So we tell young adults that at 18, 19, 20, 21, don't think about marriage. Don't think about getting with nobody. Focus on your education, build your career, go to school, right? Then when you get 30, start thinking about it. But in the meantime, don't make no babies either.
Right.
So what we're telling them is, watch this, in your peak biological years of fertility, right? 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, where you are most fertile biologically and physiologically, where you are your hormones are at their height. As young men, your testosterone is here. Your young women, your estrogen is here.
Yeah.
So fight these God-given biological and physiological urges. Act like they don't exist. In the church, would say,
it's a fight, honey. It's a fight.
The church, I'm talking about the church in particular, right? Because in the world, they'd be like, well, you go screw, just don't marry them.
Right.
Right? You go screw them, just don't make a baby and don't marry him. In the church, don't screw, but if you got to screw, don't make a baby, because then you're going to get sat down. If you're going to sin, don't make sure don't nobody find out that you're sinning. Right. But what we're telling them is, watch this, suppress these urges that God gave you for as many years as you can. Then after you build your enterprise and your empire, then go back and get that relationship.
And then it's all gone.
Listen. And then, I mean, that's a word, because now I'm at a place where I'm not willing, it's much more difficult for me to even bend with another person because I've established this routine.
Because now 10, 15, 20 years after that, right? So you are now 30, 35, 40. Then people are like, when you gonna settle down? Well, you've been telling me for the last 10 years.
Right. Hello.
You told me not to.
Right? So watch this. So now when the further you go in life, the more life you have behind you to reconcile.
That's a
right. The more baggage you have to unpack, the more life that you have behind you. That means you got to reconcile experiences in your journey. So now coming together with another human being becomes almost like a business transaction. I say often that marriage can either be the coming together of two lives or the collision of two histories. And so you got more years behind you right now at 30, 35, 40 than you had when you were 20, 21, 22. So now looking for a mate at 21 versus looking for a mate at 30, 35, 40 is a whole different experience, because now you got to think of, okay, do we live in the same city? And if we don't, who gonna move? Because now the world is, we're global in this world right now. Somebody don't live, right? So, and then the other thing is, does your profession match mine? Does your education match mine? Does the lifestyle you want? Because I like, if the sister's like, I like Birkin bags and red bottoms, and the brother's like, look, I ain't trying to do all that. I just want to make sure we got something to eat every day. That's a problem now, right? So now you got to reconcile all of these things. But in the meantime, if you're a believer, if you're a Jesus follower, you've been trying to suppress and fight sexual urges, and you may slip here and then slip it there, unless you just want people that's like, skip it. I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do, and I'm gonna get it in, and the Lord gonna have to forgive me. So you are now suppressing these urges and these thoughts and these things while you're building this empire and all these things in life. Now you come to a place in life where you're looking back and like, okay, I got all this stuff, and I got the house they told me to get, but it's empty. I got the career they told me to get, but now I ain't got nobody to take with me to the fundraiser, right? So you're doing all this stuff and you built what they told you to get, but it's not the picture that you really wanted, because you did so one of the things that my spiritual mom said this many years ago, she said, the older I get, the better I deal with the complexities of life. And I realized sometimes 2 + 2 don't equal 4, no matter how hard you try. Because sometimes in life, the input don't guarantee the same output. And we're taught, okay, you do this in the sequence and it will happen just like this. I believe, and this is why I say, I would tell my children, when you get about your sophomore, junior year in college, start looking around.
Start looking around.
Here's why I say this, right? If you're a college student and you're a Christian, what better space and time to look for a mate? Why don't I say that?
That's true.
Because if they're in college and they're in the same school as you, at least, okay, they have some shared values, right? And in college, if you saved in college, you real saved.
Listen, because I was real saved in college. Hello. Right? Tell me nothing about Jesus. Hello.
Spiritually and intellectually, there's at least some common ground there.
And y'all both broke, so ain't no expectations.
Right? So you have a closer starting point to someone in that season of your life than you do 10 years later when you meet a person at a cocktail party or a fundraiser or somebody who's the cousin of a friend. You don't know nothing about them. What's their background? Then you're trying to figure this stuff out. But whereas if you're in that space when you're in your early 20s, you know more about the worldview that they embrace. You're closer to each other's spheres of influence in the world. And you don't have to, why not let people get married young? Why not? But they don't have no money. So, truth be told, it's older folk ain't got no money. They just got a lot of debt to look like they got money.
Hello.
And that's worse.
So my view is just a little bit different. Space. But so I think there's just a lot of things that we got to reconcile and wrestle with and revisit how we tell people to build this stuff out. But
that's generations of just bad advice.
Oh yeah.
And based on experience, based on this is what I experienced, so I don't want you to have to experience, so I want you to get your own, and that may not be the right thing. I mean, it just depends on the person that you're talking to. It wholly depends on that. And then how do we build our little people up so by the time they go to college that they know who they are and not trying to figure that out. and have to, you know, depend on mommy and or daddy's experiences and mommy and daddy's script. Like I don't want my child to have to go through that. I want her to be solid in who she is. And even as a 6-year-old now, I'm just like, figure it out. Like I want you to figure it out. Like I don't want to have to tell you all the answers, because it's going to be a point where you're not going to have mommy there.
Yeah.
And so how do we get to a place where we are, as a generation, you know, putting that into our young people by the time they go to college and stuff? Because I heard that too. Like, I mean, you know, the same thing. Don't get pregnant and don't come back in here with babies. And I know I did share with my parents at a point. I was like, well, I don't even know. I don't know how to date. Like, how do you do that? I
Right.
did ask that question. And they said, well, you don't need to worry. I'm in my 20s. You don't need to worry about that. You need to make sure that you get a job, you get some insurance. And I know that was what they were. That's the best thing that they could give me based on their experience. But I think now I have a different view based on what you just said. Definitely have a different
Because
view. So
now
I want to,
you get
yeah.
a bunch of 30 and 40-year-olds that are socially awkward and don't know how to relate to the opposite sex. And it's like they don't know how to flirt. And I think, you know, and we use that word flirt.
Okay, you're going too far now. Mind your
You know,
business,
I'm
Pastor.
just saying, I mean, you
Mind your
got
business.
folks that's, you know, 28, 29, 30, 35, 40, and it's like, you don't know how to go
Right.
beyond hi with a person. Hi, how you
Right.
doing? I'm
Hey,
good.
hey.
Podcast over.
Right,
Podcast.
Nope. Keep talking.
but I'm just
Keep
saying, you know,
talking.
because we told them in their formative years. And I was a church boy. I lived this thing, right? I ain't talking about what I heard. I'm talking about what I know. As a church boy, I started preaching young. I started ministering in college, and so you know, it was you know, it was Holy Ghost and fire during those days. And, you know, if a girl was cute, I wanted to know, does she speak in tongues, and how long does she speak in tongues every day, right? So looking back, it's like, dude, you was stupid. Because
Did you ask that? Is that a question you asked?
I can neither confirm nor deny that I have ever asked that question.
That was the way Pastor Q flirted. That was the way that he flirted.
But see, then I went through a phase in my 20s where I didn't want nobody spiritual, right?
Listen, that part.
You know, I always joke with some of the younger men, like, you know, you got a choice between the Israelites and the Philistines, and some brothers like Philistine women. And so, you know, I had my Samson season where I saw some Philistines that looked mighty good to me.
Hello.
So, you know, there's like Samson's father said, you know, ain't there any Israelite women that you want to marry? Like, nope, I like the Philistines.
No,
You know?
I like these Philistines.
No.
But you know what? Part of it was a reactionary thing, because for so many years, it's like, don't do this, don't do that, don't do. And it's like, oh, well, the Philistine women look more fun.
Mm-hmm.
Hello.
Yeah, that's true.
Know?
And so this is great. So how do we then, when we've been told, you know, you make decisions based off of the way that your life turns out, and it doesn't turn out anyway that you, it doesn't, like, you went to school, you did everything they told you to do. You didn't have the baby. You didn't get caught up. You finished school. You did all these things, because I think a lot of people, because of this pandemic, have been put in a position where they really have to face themselves. And that's why I think so many businesses are starting. That's why so many, you know, because we've been pushed into,
getting written.
Books are getting, you know, people are in a space now where, you know, you like, well, dang, I've really been wasting a lot of time and really trying to reevaluate themselves. So how do you do that? Like, what's a way that you now start to figure out 35 and up identity?
You know, right. So I would say for those, especially those that are in their 30s and up, your identity, I think it's a few things. And this is a really critical conversation. You know, I went through a divorce in my early 30s. I was about 34. And so I'm now in this place where, because again, I did it right. I was a church boy, went to school, went to seminary, got my master's in ministry, working full time, you know. And I remember writing this in my journal years ago as I was going through my divorce. And I remember saying that, you know, if I looked at my life the year before that, on the outside, my life looked like a success story, right? So I was, at that time, I had a director level position in the third largest school district in the country. I was an associate pastor at what at that time was the fastest growing church in the city of Chicago. I was married to a physically attractive woman who had a, you know, 6-figure job and career and everything, drove BMW, all that. But I was miserable. I was in my early 30s at the time. So on the surface, as a young Black man from the South Side of Chicago in his early 30s, that looked like winning to most people. And so I think what you have to ask yourself is, what does winning look like for me?
Whew.
And you got to be okay with saying what winning looks like for me may not be what people around me think winning is. And I remember writing in my journal during this season, I don't think I've ever shared this publicly, but I remember writing in my journal in that season that a year ago, on the surface, it looked like my life was successful and the pinnacle of success at my age. But then a year later, I'm going through a divorce and I was preparing to transition out. I was, you know, because I also realized, okay, there's more in me ministry wise than what I've seen. So I started looking for opportunities in ministry outside of the church I was serving at. And I started looking for jobs outside of where I was because I felt like, you know what, I'm overworked and underpaid. And so I said, remember writing in my journal, on the surface, it could look like I'm losing it, right? You know, going through a divorce, potentially walking away from what was considered a prestigious job and walking away from what was a prestigious position in ministry at that time. But I said, I have more peace than I've had in years. Because I realized that on the surface, it looked good to people, but I was dying internally. And I remember during that season, I read a book, actually this book by Frank Thomas called The Choice. Dr. Frank Thomas is a former pastor. He's also a homiletics professor. And one of the things in the book he talked about was the fact that life has to be lived from the inside out, not from the outside in. You know, much of our lives, we handle stuff and we deal with life from the outside in. So going back to this whole thing of identity, right? We think of ourselves what other people have told us about, what other people have told us about ourselves, right? So people who have a healthy self-esteem is typically because they have been affirmed in a certain way. So when you're a child, you know, do folks tell you that you're pretty? Do folks tell you that you're smart? Do people tell you that, you know, oh, you're good, you're this, you're good at this, you're good at that? This is why, going back to what you mentioned, Des, about giving kids tools, right?
Yeah.
One of the best tools that we can give to children is a sense of affirmation. And watch this, teaching children how to separate their who from their do. And this is for adults too. As adults, we got to learn, and this goes back to the whole thing. What do you do now? You're 30 something, you're 40, you know, late 20s, whatever. Separate your who from your do. In other words, if you lost your job and did not have any job at all, who would you be?
Listen.
Right? If you did not have your degrees, who would you be? If you were not connected to your network of people, who would you be? Because much of the stuff many of the things that we define ourselves by are really related to our doing and not our being.
Yeah.
Our being is simply who is the you that God created? Who, and how do you define that? How do you describe that? Because again, most people say, you know, who are you? Oh, well, I this and this, and they will tell you what they do, right? Yeah. I'm a teacher, I'm a doctor, I'm a lawyer, I'm an engineer. No, that's your do. That's your profession. Who are you as a person, right? Well, I'm so and so's husband. I'm so and so's daddy, right? But who are you as a person apart from other people that you're related to? And so, you know, and then the other thing is asking that question, how do I live life from the inside out rather than from the outside in? And in this book, I went through this journey of that season of my life of really, you know, it was part spending time in the presence of the Lord, but also therapy, right? Sometimes you need the Holy Ghost and the couch. And so 2 questions in this book stuck out. And I even, from time to time when I'm making decisions in my own life now, I go back to these 2 questions. And the first question is, what do I know to be true? And the second question is, what do I want really?
That's good.
And so those questions struck me and they shook me. And I asked myself, you know, what do I know to be true? And I literally sat in my journal. I went away for 3 days on a personal retreat and spent time alone wrestling with these questions. What do I know to be true? looking back at my life, right? Because all of our experiences aren't bad, right? Even though you did what they told you to do, but you didn't get what they told you were gonna get. But there's some experiences that have been good. You've learned some stuff, right? So it's reframing your narrative, not looking at it as losses, but learning. Nelson Mandela said, "I never lose. I either win or I learn." And so, it is reframing your narrative. Go back over your narrative and say, what have my life experiences taught me? And from that, what do I know to be true? What's true about me, right? And this is the good, the bad, and the ugly, right? Because sometimes in this whole journey of self-discovery, whether it's and whether it's relating to how you deal with people, how you deal with yourself, what do I know to be true about me, about the world, about life, about God? What do I know to be true? And then the second question, what do I want really? And that's a really important question, because many times we want what we've been told to want. Right? So do you want that career because people will think it's impressive, or because you really desire to do that, right? Do you want that house because you need to look like you got money, or like, you make a decent salary? What do you want really? What is it that you really want? What is your core desire, right? And spend some time sitting with those questions. Then on the flip side of it, then what I did, apart from the book and just apart from those questions, is now I ask the question, what are the barriers to me getting what I want? And those are external and internal barriers. See, one of the things that happens is sometimes we don't realize that God wants to bless us more than we want to be blessed.
Yeah.
Sometimes we have this view of God sometimes that's like, God is just this sadistic, evil dictator in the sky that's like, oh, you want to be happy? I'm gonna ruin that, right? Oh, you like them? I'm gonna make sure they're crazy, right? It's like, oh, you want that job? I'll make sure you don't get it, right? It's like, oh, you want to be able to make some money? I'll make sure you're broke. God is not like that. God desires to bless us more than we desire to be blessed. And I tell people all the time, even as I talk to single people, that God wants you to be married. The Bible says that it's not good that the man be alone, right? Even in 1 Corinthians 7, it's better married than all these things. God wants you to have those things. It's not that God doesn't want it for you. It's that sometimes we are oblivious and blind to some of the barriers, internal and external, that get you there. So for instance, because one of the issues that I see with a lot of people, especially folks from I would say probably from 30 on up, is Black people in America have the lowest rate of marriage of any demographic group. So I have a lot of conversations with people about singleness and, their desires for companionship and marriage. So what are your obstacles and barriers, right? Is it that you are not in a place to meet people? Is that you don't know what to do when you meet people, right? Is it that there's something you're doing that's off-putting? Is it that you don't give people a chance to really know who you are? Are you self-sabotaging? It's all these questions. So what do I know to be true and what I want really? Then the other question is, are you in a place where you can attract what you want? Because one thing to want it, but it's another thing to be able to say, I can attract what I want. And so I think these are all questions that we got to wrestle with when you start talking about identity and life. But I'll go back to this whole thing of separating your who from your do. You got to start there. You got to separate who you are as a person from the stuff that you have allowed to define you, your job, your degrees, and all these things. Who are you as a person? What are your likes and dislikes? What do you really enjoy? Like if you didn't have any, what hobbies do you have? What interests you? What stirs your passion? And be honest about those things, right? One of the things that I have found, especially as it pertains to relationship, is that it's not that people don't like you, it's that they want to know what's authentically you. One of the things that is a problem is that we tend to be dogmatic in the wrong ways about, well, I'm just this and I'm that. This is just me. Well, yeah, some stuff may just be you, but some stuff may need to change. And I think that knowing the difference is important, right? So if you just got a nasty attitude, but you say, well, it's just me, somebody gonna have to accept me. No, they really don't. Because no one wants to be subjected to that foolishness, right? Nobody with good sense.
Nor do you have to accept your zodiac sign as being
That's a whole other
Right.
thing.
as being the reflection of who
Because
you
I'm a
are.
Gemini, so
So
yeah.
this is who I
Yeah.
am. Nah, sis.
Well,
Nah, bro.
you know, and that's the other thing, because Bible talks about astrology and necromancy, and I'm not going to get too deep.
Oh Lord, don't.
Because you sit up here burning sage and reading your zodiac to the point you about to pass out and wonder why stuff still ain't coming together in your life. You wait, yeah. Anyway, you sitting up here reading your zodiac to talk about what you should do today and who I should talk to. You better ask the Lord.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm not gonna get on that.
Hold on, but you said something. Oh, I want to go back to something that Crystal and I talk about, and we're not risk takers.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized just in the moment with you talking, the reason why is probably because we've gotten fed a lot of what we were supposed to be doing with our life.
Absolutely.
And so now we are in a space that we're taking risk. We have businesses now. We're starting a podcast. This is all a risk. And I think it's now because of we have the space to really get to know who we are and what we want to do. So that's very, very important.
You know, and I think that thing of risk taking is endemic to Black folk in general.
Yeah.
You know, I was talking to someone recently and was saying that that white folk look at risk very differently than we do in general, and I think that's really true. You know, ask yourself, how many times have I had an idea and I told myself no before I fully let the idea germinate? Oh, that can't happen. I can't do that. That wouldn't work. You told yourself no before you even vetted the idea fully in your head.
Yeah.
Because we are conditioned, and again, a lot of this is the baggage that we as Black folk carry, because for centuries we've been in survival mode, right? In slavery, your goal was just to survive and make sure that and hope that they don't sell your kids away, right? And just to survive, to not rock the boat, because a slave who got noticed was in trouble, right? So keep your head low, just work, do your work, don't get in trouble. People who got in trouble, even throughout Black history, leaders who got in trouble got killed. So the masses of Black folk were not marching with Dr. King. Right. They were just trying to make sure they didn't get killed and clobbered. And so we're fed this line of, get a good job, go to school, get a good job, stay on that job, and retire. But here's the sad part of that. Two things. Number one, if you work on one job for 40 years and you put all of your hopes and dreams off, you start that job when you're 23, 25 years old, you retire hopefully at 65, hopefully, if you can afford, right? Average life expectancy in America is 78 years old. So that means you now have 13 years left to live. And you've spent 40 years doing something you really did not want to do. Right? The flip side of that is our parents and grandparents and the people who told us that were preparing us for a world that no longer exists.
Right.
The day of you get a good job, work for 40 years there, get the gold watch when you retire, that doesn't exist anymore. There's fewer and fewer places where you can go and just work 40 years and just stay there. The globalization of the economy, all of these demographic shifts, economic shifts, and all of these things, that economy is not the same anymore.
And
right?
Technology is growing.
It is.
Yeah.
So, wow. Hey guys, I'm going to go get my life together after this podcast. I know
Pastor
we're
Q
the
has
life
fixed
coaches.
our lives.
I know we're the life coaches, but so wow.
I have a question. I have a question, and I want to go back to Black men. And this can be any man, but how boys are treated when they're younger, like just get up, and then by the time it's time for them to relate with someone, they don't know how to do that, or they cannot emote. But when and I don't know if you can answer this for everybody, but when do men get to a place where they accept that responsibility and learn how to do that so that they can relate to their friends or their wives or spouses? Like when do they have that transition?
And
Or
let me
can you go ahead, Crystal?
add to that. Do you think that is an identity thing, or is that just like, so as Desiree's been married, she's about to celebrate 9 years of marriage. So do you think that is something that is formed, like you grow into that, or that's something that you should look for? Like there, I don't know if that makes sense, but what is,
what do you mean look for?
like, should a person, are there certain identity traits that we just should have at this point? Or
I think that depends on tolerance, but yeah, I get what you're saying.
So you're saying, like, okay, as a woman, is that an identity trait you should look for in a man?
I mean, just using that example, like, if we're just talking about
a couple ways, right? So I think that as men, it changes when you decide to change, and there's no timeline for that. Some men figure it out earlier, some men figure it out later, some never figure it out. And for men, as human beings, pain is one of our greatest motivators. So when the pain of your present begins to threaten the promise of your future, you will change. In other words, when you get to the point in your life where you wake up one day and you realize,
I'm gonna put your Cash App up here.
Yeah.
Because you need an offering for that.
When you get to the point where you realize, if I stay the way I am, I'll never become who I want to be. And I've taught this before, that it is direction, not intention, that determines where you end up. I'll say that again. It is direction, not intention, that determines where you end up. In life, we tell people, why I had good intentions. I meant well. You may have meant well, but your intentions don't determine the outcome. Your actions do, right? Your direction does. So if I'm in Chicago and I say I want to drive to Milwaukee, which is north of the city, but I get on I-57, which is going south toward Memphis, I'm not going to reach Milwaukee. I could pray, Lord, take me to Milwaukee. Oh, gee, yeah, Jesus, give me Milwaukee, Jesus. Oh, Jesus, Milwaukee, Jesus. Yes, Jesus, Milwaukee. I can bind every devil that's stopping me from getting to Milwaukee. You foul spirit of stopping me from getting to Milwaukee, I bind you. I can huck him, I can lay hands on my car and say, my truck, in Jesus' name, you taking me to Milwaukee. I can prophesy Milwaukee over myself. I can anoint my head and say, you going to Milwaukee now. But if I get in the car and head south on 57, I ain't getting to Milwaukee. Why? Because my direction betrayed my intention. And I think we have to come to the place in life where we ask ourselves, of all the things that I say I want, am I moving in a direction that will position me to get that or get there?
But does that start in is that your mindset?
It starts in your mindset. So for instance, going back to this whole thing of emotions and pain. So I think as men, when you start to realize either I'll be transparent, right? Men we don't do vulnerability well in general. I'm one. I am men, right? So
I'm men.
we typically don't do vulnerability well. But I have recognized, even within myself, that if I want to have a healthy marriage in the future, I got to get more comfortable with vulnerability, right? And so that's hard, but it's being willing to do the hard stuff. And so I think as men, when you start to say, okay, I recognize that this may be something I have to deal with, you start to realize, one, you realize the consequences of you not dealing with it. And the consequences of you not dealing with it are, if you're married, you can have an emotionally distant marriage and your wife will feel shut out of your life. Your kids may feel shut out of your life. You will never have the level of fulfillment that you want in your marriage or in your family life or in just in general. If you're not married, the consequence could be that you will sabotage what could be a relationship that God brought into your life, right? So I think you got to be aware of the consequences. Then number two, you got to decide that I don't want those consequences, and I'm willing to do whatever I have to do to avoid those consequences. And then thirdly, you got to humble yourself and be willing to say, you know what? It's an area of my life I got to work on. I got to deal with. I got to address. I got to get help. And then fourth, you got to invite help where it's needed. For the problem is, for many men, we don't like to ask for help. And that's just reality, right? Before it's GPS on our phones, we did not like to ask for direction.
Because my daddy kept an atlas, okay? And I'm like, what we going to do with this?
I learned that from my dad, right? I kept and I was the navigator. So when we were driving south, I was the navigator. I had a map. I tell my dad, all right, we got this exit. I mean, so I was blessed to learn a good sense of direction. So I didn't have to ask for directions too often. Thank God. I would have been in trouble. I would have been a stubborn man. I ain't stopping. With a good sense of direction. But so I think we have to be willing to ask for help. This is where mentors come in place. This is where therapy comes into place. This is where having accountability. You know, as men, and just people in general, I think as men especially, you got to ask yourself the question, who really knows you, right? And I have a few brothers in my life that really know me for real, you know, that know me, that when they ask me how I'm doing, if I say I'm okay, they know when I'm telling the truth or not. And so you got to have people in your life, especially as a man, who really know you. Because women, they all are a little better than we are at saying when you're not okay. Unless you got attitude. You okay? I'm fine. You know, y'all
all right.
But you know, as men, you got to have people in your life who really know you. You got to have people in your life who pour into you, mentors, spiritual fathers, and things like that. And people who, I think for men, this is especially important. People who you can tell your ugliest truth to, and they won't judge you. Because see, one of the things that stops men from vulnerability many times is being worried about how people are going to react. You know, and so if we feel that somebody may react a certain way, or they may not, or they may look at us a certain way, you know, if we share something with them, we're not going to open up. And so is finding those safe spaces and those people who you can connect with openly and honestly, and have those kind of conversations, and then getting the right tools. And so I think that's where it comes in, because it doesn't come naturally to most folk. It's going to be getting those tools and then just committing to doing the work. It's going to take time.
Yeah.
And then inviting feedback, right? So, and then I think the other thing is for men opening up, recognize that you opening up and being vulnerable, you're not going to be vulnerable about your most embarrassing, most shameful thing out the gate. Start with something small. Start small and go from there, right? Being vulnerable might be something like, you know what? I really don't like my job, you know, and admitting it, right? Being vulnerable might be something, being able to say something like, you know what? I'm not good at X, Y, and Z, and I wish I was. Start with something small, you know, and build from there, right? Vulnerability has to be practiced in general, especially for men. It's something that you have to practice, because it's not going to be just this natural flow, a natural thing. So to that part of the question, I would say for men, it changes when you decide to change. When you decide that the pain of your present is unbearable, and that you don't want to remain in the state that you're in, and that you realize I can be another way, and life can be different for me.
Yeah, that's good. That's
very good. Thank you, Pastor Q.
Listen, we could keep you here all day, because you know your wisdom is off the chain.
It is.
But we, I think, you know, everything that you said is good for men, and it's good for us. We really, because, you know, I've definitely been through a huge identity change in this last year. I know Desiree had, like, welcome to pandemic 2020.
Finding ourselves
2020. And so one of the biggest things is just giving ourselves grace to evolve. And like Pastor Q said early on, this is a journey. And so just giving yourself grace along the journey, and really being intentional about figuring out it is that, God put you on this earth to do. I really tell people all the time, you were not purposed to just pay bills and die. That's not what, that was not his intention when he was building us from dust. Like, he was not, you gonna pay ComEd for the rest of your life and you gonna pay AT&T. Like, that was not, and we know that we have been, especially as Black people, we have been socialized to really have to try to prove ourselves. And so we try to prove our worth by doing all this stuff. And if it's really what you want, great. But if you're just doing it just to, prove someone wrong or prove, like, we just really want to encourage everybody that's listening to really start, like Pastor Hugh said, what was it, Desiree? Figuring out your who versus your do. Is that
your who and your do. Yeah.
Who and your do, the difference. That's
the difference. Yeah.
And knowing the difference. So again, we thank you, Pastor Q, for this great time. We're sure you're going to be asked to come back. All this wisdom. So we totally appreciate you.
As you're talking about journey and this whole piece, I did recently write a devotional.
Come on, author.
Evolutionary Chain. So for those that are trying to start on a journey, shameless plug here, it is a great way to really just kind of start that process, right? It has a daily reading, and some of the days have reflection questions, and so it covers different themes, things like repentance, things like anger, things like just praise, and so it's a lot of different things. Has a reading for each day. And it's just, questions and things that, kind of give you a way to just kind of start on your journey in your walk with God. So I encourage those who are trying to start some kind of process of transformation. This is a great tool.
All right.
Well, we will be purchasing those. Thank you.
Listen,
I would love it.
Listen, the whole family getting one. Okay. All right. So thank you guys. Pastor Q, do you want to just tell people where they can find you on social media?
Sure. You can follow me on Instagram at The Only Q Mumphery. That's Mumphery, The Only Q Mumphery. You can follow me on Facebook. You can't friend me on Facebook, but you can follow me on Facebook, Quentin Mumphery. You can follow me on Twitter at Pastor Q Mumphery. You can check out my, of course, New Hope Covenant Church Chicago is a church, NHCCC.org. You can follow the church on Instagram at New Hope Chicago. Follow the church on Facebook at New Hope Covenant Church Chicago. You can also follow my personal website at pastorq.org.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Pastor Q. You have saved our lives and all of our listeners.
Thank y'all for having me.
Listen, and to all you men out there, get your direction in order, okay? Listen, go on and get you a Ron Isley beard.
Okay. All right.
Okay,
Here we go.
I'm sorry, Desiree.
Well, that's the end of our end of our podcast. Crystal, did you want to talk about how to reach you?
Yes, you can follow me on Instagram at relentless_coaching_consulting. And you can also follow my personal page at DJK Mace. And you can go visit my website, www.relentlesscoachingandconsulting.com. It's actually an LLC now. So we're excited about that. But yes, please come on and holler at me and follow me.
Thank you. And you can follow me on Instagram at Early Vision Consulting. And my website is earlyvisionconsulting.com. And I will make sure that we post all of our products up so that you can see those and make sure that you go and support us. We appreciate it.
Yes. So thank you guys. And we will be back
Thank you.
with another episode soon.